Okay, as I said, welcome back. So we are going to be hearing from each of the groups now about the areas that you're particularly keen to focus on before we begin the process of developing recommendations this afternoon. So the questions, just to remind you again, were number 1, how should Scotland change how it travels by land to tackle the climate emergency in an effective and fair way? And question number 2 was how should Scotland change how it travels by air to tackle the climate emergency in an effective and fair way? So if you have volunteered to give feedback from your group, please do get prepared now. We have around 90 seconds per person, so it's a little bit longer than we've had in a previous weekend. But of course, I will keep you to time. And if you are watching me on the screen, I will have my stop sign, which I'll hold up just as your time has run out. So it'd be great if you could wrap up as soon as possible after that. But yeah, I'll let you know if anything does run over time, but 90 seconds, that's what we're aiming for. So what you'll be doing here is you should be sharing a priority for action that you have identified where you think there is scope for effective recommendations to be made. So first, we're going to hear from the land travel priorities. And the first person we have coming up to speak, so do be prepared to unmute yourself, is Marianne from group number 11.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Our group felt accountability and action on change was needed from Scottish Government and councils to provide cleaner, greener buses, i.e. hydrogen and electric, with efficient and integrated systems provided for free, to encourage usage by all and discourage car usage. Also, not to forget the needs of the disabled and those in rural areas, promote the benefits of travelling by public transport, i.e. relax, read, use Wi-Fi, meet and talk to people, enjoy the scenery, no parking fees, save money and the environment. After all, there are cons of delays, disruptions, crowds, noise, dirt, weather, still have to walk to your destination. So we feel this needs to be free to encourage more usage. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Marianne. That was well to time. Brilliant. Next, we have group number 12, which is Capolo. Very welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Our group thought that nationalising the public transport service would be really good, and we need to ensure that services can still run, but ownership of those services should be with communities rather than with private companies. We also thought there's a greater need to understand why government is currently subsidizing profit for private companies rather than investing in the communities that need those services. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So both groups there touching on public transport. Next, it's group number 13 and Sandy.
Good afternoon all. We were really interested in integrated travel systems, but 2 main points we took was possibility of working together to make public spaces more practical, pleasant and safe with better planning for walking and cycling. But when that's not possible, further afield, cope together with more cheaper public transport with altogether better value. And we think there should be a big emphasis towards subsidisation of public transport. We've kind of worked out together that some counties do have subsidisation, some counties don't. So we think that subsidisation should definitely be looked at for the future.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sandy. So again, public transport coming up there, the idea of subsidisation. On to group number 14, Maggie.
Hi. We're also looking at public transport, but we want to explore more options and details to see if it could be half nationalised, half private. That's what we're looking at, and make it more cheaper and affordable. One ticket covers all. Make it for the people instead of profit. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Maggie. So again, public transport coming up, more options, cost and affordability, and integrated transport systems. And group number 15, it's Colin, and that's the last group there for land travel.
Our group was keen to prioritise making public transport cheaper, or in some cases no cost, and enabling integration between different modes of transport to help people reduce their use of cars in a fair way. Looking at government to prioritise and control public transport to help integrate that travel, and perhaps some kind of Oyster card type system to again help people make better decisions to and not be inconvenienced by moving away from cars as we have just now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Colin. Brilliant. So yeah, I think you may be able to have seen a few common themes coming out from there. So please do jot down any notes that you need to as we're going along here. Right, we're going to move on to air next. So the first person I have from group number 11 is Alistair to feedback on air, please.
Hello there. If we are to reduce the volume of greenhouse emissions from air travel, we simply have to reduce the volume of flights until zero emissions air travel is possible. No single action can achieve this. So it can only be achieved if there's a combination of taxes and incentives, such as improving the rail links, especially to services such as the Euro trains, the promotion of UK holidays, and the frequent flyer taxes, but excluding places like the Highlands and Islands. Both government and business should be encouraged to promote this, and the use of the greenest land-based travel available should always be taken into account. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Alistair. Thank you. So group number 12, we have Capolo again. Very welcome.
Thank you. So we picked up on taxation again, and we thought that we should be taxing frequent flyers and do this by journey rather than flights, as some flights necessarily include multi-changes in places which consumers don't necessarily have control over. Thank you.
Thank you very much to group number 12. And again, that idea of taxation coming up. Okay, group number 13, David B.
Afternoon all. Yeah, we looked at air travel from a comparison of cost and times and an integrated factor, not just the time aspect. In other words, if you could somehow compare what sort of missions you were having, an integrated time span regarding it, and just all information that just generally makes sure that air travel is not just the first point of call, and not just the fact of the cost factor as well, just all information that gives you a better choice to make sure air is not the first choice you make, especially for shorter journeys.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, David, to group 13. So number 14, we have Helen feeding back.
Hi, so again, the biggest priority we address, very similar to everyone else, is to reduce the number of flights that are taken. So looking at that from effective and fair way, obviously we can educate people about flights and the danger from flights. What we felt, as everyone else, is that mechanisms for, so de-incentivising, I suppose, frequent flyers, either through the company, personal tax. So it's the mechanisms of how you would do that, which is very complicated. But I think that would be a priority, just to reduce the number of flights going forward.
Brilliant. Thank you very much again, Helen. And yeah, some of the ideas around education and information coming up there again too, I see. Group number 15 is Beverly.
Hi there.
Yeah.
So we also thought that to introduce a frequent flyer levy to make it fairer, so it would encourage the people that fly the most to take fewer flights, while not penalising the people that don't fly as often. In addition to that, we also thought that we should make rail travel cheaper and invest in the railway infrastructure just to make it a much more viable alternative.
Brilliant. Thank you very much again, Beverly. And again, a few ideas that have come up from a few of the other groups too. Okay, so that's us done with feedback. Everyone kept to time absolutely perfectly. So thank you so much for doing that. I'm now actually going to hand over to Kevin. So get prepared, Kevin, who is going to share a few reflections from what he heard just there, and maybe any kind of additional comments that you might want to be aware of. So Kevin, are you ready to talk for a wee while? Go for it.
I am, just a few minutes. I have to say I found that quite uplifting, hearing those responses. They're not the responses I typically hear when I talk to policymakers or businesses. And so that was good to hear those. I mean, the very clearly on the aviation one was not only the importance of technology, which everyone is really, generally we're enthusiastic about having lower carbon technologies, but very much this idea of having to reduce the volume of flying, and that actually in doing that we have to do that fairly. And that was I think that was clear from all the feedback, that we have to do something about how often we fly, and that has to be something we do fairly, and what are the policy instruments that are out there. But also that there's sort of slightly more sort of nuanced way of thinking about it, that if you're in the Highlands and Islands, maybe that you shouldn't be comparing important flights within the Highlands and Islands with numerous holiday flights outside the UK or outside Scotland. So I think there's a sort of recognition there of like a priority of how we address these issues. When it comes to the land transport, I mean, it was very clear that public transport was absolutely key, and that I got the impression that people are sort of suggesting that it's not as good as it could be, and it needs to be improved significantly. It needs to be seen as a service. It's not just there for profit. It's there to provide a service to the community, and that service has to be clean and effective and integrated, and obviously low carbon. But I was surprised there not to hear something else about electric vehicles. Because in the policy realm, again, electric vehicles are something that people always talk about. I think overly talk about it, actually, to be honest. And so in some ways, it was refreshing not to really hear it mentioned, or hardly at all. But I was a bit surprised. I thought perhaps there'd be a little bit more emphasis on the electrical vehicles. But across all that feedback, I think as someone who spends a lot of my time working on transport with the usual suspects, with the transport companies, with the policymakers, it was nice and refreshing to hear a different set of views about how we can respond to the challenges, and actually I think respond in a much more way, in a way that is firstly is more timely. We can do something about demand in the near term, and that was really important to think about rather than just waiting for technology. And second, to do things that are good for all of society, not just for those that use the transport. So the idea of fairness and opening access through public transport are really key. So yeah, a refreshing set of feedbacks, I think.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Kevin, for sharing some reflections there. A bit of food for thought, I'm sure. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to just listen to me for a wee while, talking about the process of developing recommendations before we then go back into our breakout groups and start that process. So it's, of course, really, really important to talk you through the proposal for how this is going to work. So I want to start by taking you back to the beginning of the remit and of the Assembly. So I'm just going to share some slides with you just now. So the Climate Change Scotland Act 2019 called for the Citizens' Assembly, which we're all here as part of, to make recommendations on measures to achieve Scotland's emissions reductions targets. And in line with the question we have been given, to do this in a way that is both effective and fair. So of course, we've looked at that idea of fairness and effective change, both this weekend and in the past weekend, and that will be threaded throughout. So I'm just going to read out the text of the slide, and it's important that I do that as we go along so that everyone can follow. So for the remit, Section 2A of the Climate Change Emissions Reduction Targets Scotland Act 2019, otherwise referred to as the 2019 Act, requires Scottish ministers to establish a panel to be known as a Citizens' Assembly to exercise the following functions. A, consider how to prevent or minimise or remedy or mitigate the effects of climate change. B, make recommendations on measures proposed to achieve the emissions reduction targets. And C, make recommendations about such other matters in relation to climate change as the Scottish ministers may refer to the Assembly where approved by Scottish Parliament resolution. So in order to do this, what's on that slide there, you've already spent almost 3 weekends learning about the current situation and exploring avenues for making change, including in the last 2 days, so today and yesterday, hearing about some specific proposals that different advocacy groups are arguing as the best way forward. So what we are now about to begin the process of doing is creating the recommendations that will be voted on by all of the Assembly members, so voted on by you, and included with the Assembly's report that will go back to the Parliament. This is going to be a multi-stage process, and that really starts this afternoon. And although we recognise that some of you may have been a bit frustrated perhaps by not being able to jump straight into finding those solutions, we hope that in retrospect, at least the different lenses that we've been trying to bring to the problem have been valuable in opening up the wide range of potential recommendations that could be what you choose to focus on. And of course, that choice is yours, from change perhaps at an individual level through policy and institutional changes to whole-scale systematic change to the norms and expected structures of society. So these recommendations, these proposals, these changes, it's up to you really. So just moving on here to step one, which is developing the framework for provisional recommendations to address our first question. So this afternoon, you're going to begin identifying the types of recommendations you want to make to address the first two of our themes questions. So they're the ones that are focusing here on land and on air travel. And we'll be using a standard template across all of the groups, which I'll show you in a second, and in all of the streams to help ensure the recommendations are being developed in a consistent way. So the slide I'm about to show you, all of the groups will be working from this. And just a heads up, the next slide's a bit fuzzy, but the template you'll see in your groups is a little less so. Okay, so the questions that are behind this, so when you go into your breakout groups, you'll be working on the Jamboard, and by the end of today, you should have completed these templates for each of your ideas related to land and to air travel. It says diet on here, it's just an example from the diet group. So the questions you're going to be addressing this afternoon are as follows. So if you are looking at the slides and you're looking at the top, at that red box just at the top there, the question that sits behind that is, what is the challenge, issue, or problem you are seeking to address through the recommendation you want to make? Then next, you'll be asked, what is your proposed recommendation trying to achieve? So that's really the purpose behind it and what you think will change as a result of this action or this recommendation being taken forward. You will then be asked, and this is in the yellow box, what type of action it is that you are actually suggesting happens. And drawing on what you were saying earlier, that could be perhaps tax incentives, new regulations, government investments. It could be information, community education, or something else. So it's whatever action you think is needed. You will then be asked to consider who you think needs to take that action. And are there relevant considerations related to fairness that you want to consider? And then finally, are there any additional conditions or considerations that will need to be put in place to make this effective? So that's absolutely anything else that you think needs to be known and needs to be logged as part of this consideration and of this thinking. Of course, when you are in your groups itself, this might work in a slightly different order to how it's set out there, but of course, do this in a way that works for you and works for your group in order to fill this out today. And the template, I hope, will help to ensure we focus on why a proposed action that we may want to recommend is important. So focusing on that why, and of course, how and why it has the potential to help effectively deliver change rather than just the action itself. So today it's not so much about spending time crafting the wording that will come of a specific recommendation, but it's rather focusing on the types of action or change that you believe will help Scotland make real steps towards addressing the climate emergency in an effective and fair way. Okay, so now just moving on to what's going to happen after this weekend and between now and the fourth weekend, is that there's going to be a process of consolidation, and that's as groups might be working on very similar proposals. And then there's going to be technical refinement of proposed recommendations to ensure they are targeted at the correct institution and level. And that's a little piece of work that will be led by our evidence group. So regarding that first bullet point there, the process of consolidation, the work that you do in your small groups this afternoon will be collated, so it'll be brought together and consolidated. So we recognise, as I'm sure that you do, that many groups may end up focusing on the same aspects of a topic, and you may very well come up with very, very similar if not the same, approaches and recommendations. That's absolutely okay. In fact, it's something that we may expect to happen in a process like this. And thinking about the feedback you gave there, of course, there were some commonalities coming out in where you were focusing already. So where this is the case, we will do some work in the background to blend proposals together, but bear with me as I explain this, but only when they have identified the same problem and the same solution, even though they might have used different words. Often you find slightly different words have been used, but it is hinting at the same problem and the same solution. So if groups have addressed the same problem with different measures, then that's going to remain separate because it's not the same. That will remain separate. Regarding that second bullet point, the technical refinement, so you've spent a lot of time learning about the climate emergency and the Scottish context in relation to climate change, but no one expects you to be experts in things like the layers of government, so the respective powers each government holds and different policy making protocols. So this is why we have invited the expert leads to review the frameworks for recommendations that you are going to be developing over the course of this and this weekend, and of course the next weekend, to help ensure that any recommendations that you're making and the Assembly are making are able to land, as it were, with the appropriate institution to respond. So for example, if a group proposes legislative changes to achieve X, the process of technical refinement might identify that actually it's not a legislative matter, but it's something that could be dealt with on perhaps a policy or a regulation level. So they may suggest that perhaps you use that wording. And of course, it's up to you what you do adopt in the end. If, for example, you have proposed a recommendation that local government should do something, and it was actually not a power that was held by the local government, so it wasn't something that they could actually act upon, then our evidence leads will be able to flag that to you and suggest that maybe the recommendation could be directed to the place where that power is held. So that, for example, could be the Scottish government instead of the local government. Although, of course, that doesn't stop you recommending, for example, that some place where you're aiming your recommendation actually does need to have the powers to make change happen. So even if local government, for example, now doesn't have a particular power, you may want to raise that you think local government should have that power, for example. Of course, this is a lot to take in, so please do bear with me as we go through this. And of course, if there are any questions, we'll have a chance to raise them in their groups, and I can come around a bit later. But just to finalise this slide, both these processes will be done in a clear and transparent way so that members can track the process. So you will be able to track what's happened, and explanations will be given to help you understand the reasons for any changes proposed. And I think proposed is a really important word in that sentence because they are proposals. At the end of the day, these recommendations are yours to take them where you will, but we hope that this will help you to make recommendations that feel fair and effective. Okay, so the next step, step 2. At weekend number 4, you will repeat the learning and the prioritising process for questions 3 and 4 of your theme. So as we've looked at travel this weekend, next weekend we're going to look at those 2 questions related to work. So when we come back in weekend 4, that's basically what we're going to be doing. And then again on that Sunday of weekend 4, we're again going to produce the set of frameworks for potential recommendations to address them. So the process that you do this afternoon will be repeated in weekend 4 for those 2 questions related to work. And then we're moving on to step number 3, and this is what's happening at weekend 4. So the proposed recommendations relating to questions 1 and 2 will be brought back to all of you after that process that we talked about happening between the weekends of consolidation and technical refinement. And I'm just going to read out the slide very quickly. The proposed recommendations relating to questions 1 and 2 will be brought back to all after the process of consolidation and technical refinement to review collectively and agree that they should be put to the wider Assembly for consideration. There will also be an opportunity here to identify any further information members feel they need in order to make sure their recommendations will help Scotland change to tackle the climate emergency in an effective and fair way. So, just moving off the text of the slide there, that means that within each thematic stream, so in our stream here of travel and work, there is going to be the opportunity to review the proposed recommendations collectively. So that means not just the group that drafted that proposal, there'll be an opportunity to do it together as we are here. And for the members involved in developing the ideas to confirm that, as written, the proposed recommendation meets the intent. So think about what you're really intending when you're kind of developing that framework today, and just make sure that that follows through to whatever it is that comes back. And also to agree as a third of the Assembly as a whole, so we're a third, that each proposed recommendation should be put to the wider Assembly for consideration. So we're basically going to agree that stuff will then be put to the wider Assembly for consideration. Okay, thanks for following me. We've got a few slides left, so do bear with me a little longer. We're now on to step number 4 and what's going to happen at weekend 5. At weekend 5, we're going to repeat the process for the proposed recommendations developed in relation to questions 3 and 4. So members are going to work in their small groups to develop supporting statements for each recommendation. And these will focus on why you or they believe the recommendation is important, fair and effective. So that's at weekend 5. Also at weekend 5, step number 5, members will present their themes recommendations back to the whole Assembly for discussion and for debate. So the focus really here will be in weekend 5 on identifying where there are some commonalities of approach that could be combined looking across, identifying where there are inconsistencies or contradictions between the recommendations from each theme, and also agreeing where there may be trade-offs that might need to be made. So we'll be looking at the idea of trade-offs at weekend 5. And then at the 6th weekend, weekend number 6, the slide here says that the whole Assembly will review the full set of proposed recommendations to assess them for any contradictions, gaps or wider opportunities. Members of the Assembly will be asked to vote to endorse the recommendations for the final report. So that's weekend number 6 and step number 6. Okay, so of course that was quite a bit to get through, and I hope it all makes sense. But please do flag to your facilitators if you have any questions at all, and they'll be able to make a note of any specific clarifications that are needed. I'm going to be available during the next breakout session if needed to answer or try to answer any specific questions that you might have. If there's any we can't answer today, we'll make sure that they're taken back to the appropriate place and a response is given. We're also going to send everyone a written version of this proposed plan to consider. And there's going to be another opportunity to discuss if there are any changes to be made to it at weekend 4 as well. So that's quite important to know, I think. Okay, whew, breathe. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to just hop straight back into our groups. So what we're going to be doing in this next breakout discussion, of course, as I said, please do raise any questions that you may have at this stage. We're going to be moving on now to focus on the areas of recommendation related to question 1 through our theme. So just a reminder, that means that we'll be looking at how should Scotland change how it travels by land to tackle the climate emergency in an effective and fair way. And then after that, we'll be moving on to the air travel. So you will have and be working to that template that I showed you at the start of those slides there. But of course, your facilitators will there and will guide you through the course of this afternoon. So happy deliberations. I hope it's a really interesting discussion and you get to where you want to be getting today. And do let us know if there's any questions. So if we can open the breakouts and send everyone away, that'd be great. Right, well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your afternoon of deliberations. Really looking forward to seeing what came out of them. So it just brings us really to the close for today. We will be back together on the 23rd and the 24th of January, but I just want to give you a huge, huge thanks for your involvement over the course of this weekend. And of course, when we come back together on the 23rd and 24th of January, we'll be moving on to look at the work stream. So I am actually just going to invite Nick from the research team just to speak for 1 minute before I then hand over for our official closing for this weekend. So Nick.
Thanks very much, Kelly. Hi, everyone. It's been great to be part of your discussions this weekend. Really enjoyed being in the different groups. I hope you've enjoyed it too. This is just a chance now to remind you that we have another survey coming up, which will be about partly this weekend. So another opportunity to get your views on how you found the weekend, how what you've done over those 2 days. So it's really important. We really welcome your views back on that, as Kayla said at the beginning of the weekend. There'll be 3 ways in which you can access that survey. So I'll put it in the chat in a minute. It'll also be emailed to you. And if you go on to the next page of the online hub, the survey will also be available there. It should just take 10 to 15 minutes. So perhaps if you still feel up to it, you could do it now and get that done, but it'll be open for the next few days. So there is time to do it at other points. If you haven't yet signed up to the research, and we've said this a number of times, but there's still an opportunity to do that. Again, you can get in touch with the team about that, but I'll also post in the chat a consent form which gives your a consent to being part of the research, and then you would just be part of it on an ongoing basis. Respect the fact that if you don't want to be involved, but if you do want to join, you've thought about it again, we'd be delighted to have you. So thanks again for your involvement, and I look forward to being part of these discussions again next weekend. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Nick. So just once again, a big thanks from me. I appreciate it's been a lot of hard work this weekend, so really, really glad that you've thrown yourselves into it and continued with your deliberations, and look forward to us continuing next weekend and beyond. So we're just going to come to a close now, and then everyone will be on their way. So I'm just going to hand over to Ian just to say one final goodbye.
Thanks, Kelly. Listen, I'd like to thank you all. I mean, I think we all realise from this end, just to kind of emphasise to you how difficult it is, the things you're wrestling with. You know, we pop in and we offer up little pieces of wisdom where we can, and pieces sometimes of not so wisdom. But I think we realise that these are difficult things you're wrestling with. You know, we have these experts that come in, but remember, those experts are experts and advocates in one tiny little area. You're looking at a much broader field. So this is difficult, and we really appreciate, we're really impressed by the complexity of the thoughts that are going on in there. So I'd like to thank also Kevin for leading us through this weekend, and as you, the Secretariat and all the people behind us for making it all so well oiled. But it has been really interesting, and yeah, look forward to the deliberations when we get on to talking about the work one in weekend 4. So have a great couple of weeks deliberations before we meet again. Thank you.